Hello and welcome to Easy Like a Sunday Morn. I'm your host, Shane Lockwood, and this is episode 52. It's the 20th of March 2016. Welcome to the show. I'd like to start off by thanking all my new listeners to the show, and I thought what I would try and do is explain the nature of this podcast. This podcast is not political in the sense that it's not pushing a political agenda. It is not religious in the sense that it's not pushing a particular religious or non-religious agenda. It's not a niche podcast talking about one particular subject. This podcast can cover any subject in the world. It can talk about politics, it can talk about religion, it can talk about science, which is mainly what it's about. But it's my podcast. That's not an ego statement. It's what I wish to broadcast and present to the internet and the podcast listening public. But the main idea behind this podcast is that there is a sacred space, not in a spiritual sense, not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense, between you and me, a sacred space, a 30-minute window where you can just relax, unwind, unpack all of the drama and all of the nonsense of the previous week, and then you can mellow out, but work yourself up and build yourself up, build your self-esteem, ready for the dreaded Monday morning shift, or whenever it is that you're going to work. This is not necessarily time specific. This is about the feel of what this podcast can do for you. It's 30 minutes of me talking about whatever I want to talk about, and it's your choice as to whether you actively listen to my voice or whether you just listen to the sound of the voice, soothing, calming, relaxing, because we all know that after Friday night, at the end of the work week, you go out, you have a few drinks, have a few parties. Saturday's the same. You have a mini recovery Saturday morning. Then you go out on Saturday night, Saturday afternoon. Same again. You have your parties, your social life, so on and so forth. But Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, you have to prepare for Monday. But before we get to Sunday afternoon, you've got Sunday morning. Sunday morning is a sacred space that you can create. It's not a religious thing. Now, if you are religious, you can use that sacred space to commune with your higher powers or whatever it is that you're into. I do not push that sort of thing here on this podcast. Or just to relax, unwind, unpack, and just let go of all the crap, all the office dramas, all the people that would cut you off in traffic, all the stupidity of the management that you've got to deal with, people above you, people at your level who are trying to backstab you, sabotage you. Yeah, they record everything that you do, and they report it all back to the boss and the people underneath you, so on and so forth, all jutting for a position, and they're all backstabbing and backbiting and whatnot. You just let go of all of that. You let go of all your childhood traumas, all your eating disorders, all the abuse, all the verbal abuse, all the nonsense, okay? For 30 minutes, none of that exists. In reality, no, that stuff no longer exists anyway, but you're holding on to it in your mind. But this is not a psychology podcast. This is not about people having mental illnesses and things like that. This is just between you and me. Okay. Now, I've gone on for a fair bit, but I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I had gone to, I'll open the topic up. It's Skeptics in the Pub. I went to a meeting called Skeptics in the Pub on Friday, and I'd missed the previous week. The previous month. It's a monthly meeting. And I've been to the one before, and I met up with a few other podcasters. There was Steve Davis and Nigel Dobson-Keefe from the Adelaide Show podcast. And I thought I'd just meet up with them and have a chat and whatnot in the first one. And I ended up meeting like a whole heap of people. The February meeting, apparently there was a woman from some UFO group, and she wanted to get into a big verbal fight with the skeptics there, and I wasn't there, but apparently it went off, and people wanting to cause trouble. But Friday night was largely uneventful, but I learnt quite a lot, and you learn from certain people. There was a guy there, I think by the name of Mark, but I won't go into surnames of people that I don't know all that well. But he was talking about, because he's a screenwriter, and he talks about the process of screenwriting and things like this. But he was talking about how he knew Kate Blanchett before she was quote unquote Kate Blanchett. And he'd say, look, there's no glamour, there's no performance at 4 a.m. There's, it's all put on, it's all show, and it's all acting, makeup, lighting, and all the rest of it, And he was talking about how he met Tom Cruise, and then how short Tom Cruise actually is. But Tom Cruise has a little secret in that he knows people's names and surnames before. He'll know who you are before you meet him, sort of thing. And he'd probably have advisors and stuff like that do all that sort of stuff for him. And there was a few other people. We're talking about the intricacies and the finesse behind, and the secrets behind making the perfect espresso. I can't even say espresso. Espresso, whatever. And how long after you've ground the coffee beans that they still stay fresh, and these people can tell the difference between a 14-day-old, coffee bean and a 15-day-old. It becomes very bitter, I think. and the exact amount of pressure that you need for the coffee machine, and the temperature of the water at certain times, and the colour has to be perfect, and so on and so forth. And they've got it down to like a fine art. And, they're making sure that the air doesn't get to the coffee beans, and it's very, very intricate. And of course, the funny thing is that someone says, I was going to spend, like thousands of dollars on a coffee machine, but I only had $200, and I spent $120 on a coffee machine, but it's just as good as the bistros. So you've got to really shop around, and it sort of helps to actually know what it is that you're actually looking at. One of the things that came up was a little scientific fact that duck, yes, the bird duck is the only animal, the only duck, the only bird species where the fat is actually located in the one spot on its body. It's down the front of it. And for some reason, other animals like chickens, geese, whatever, any other bird has fat distributed like all over its body. I mean, you've eaten a chicken, you know how there's fat all the way through it. But with duck, the fat is in the one spot, so it's easier to cook. And duck is apparently the best tasting bird meat that there is. And I think if you order like duck soup, it's possibly the worst thing you can do with duck. I mean, it's still duck, so it's better than chicken. But Peking duck is the best you can meal you can do with a duck. Very, very interesting. I've tried duck soup in Vietnamese restaurants, but because I was sort of vegetarian at the time, I wasn't really interested in duck, but I might give it a try next time. But at $30 a plate, 30 Australian dollars at a plate, it's not going to be a very regular occurrence, let me tell you. Oh, the secret behind the success of the animated series Peppa Pig is that there is a parental connection in every episode. And you've got Mama Pig and Daddy Pig. And that's done for the parents. So the children watching don't get the parent, mummy and daddy jokes. But when you are watching Peppa Pig with your children, there are mum and dad jokes there that only sort of adults will get, but without being crude or rude. But children can see the interaction between a mummy pig and a daddy pig. And the funny thing is, in Arabic cultures, Peppa Pig is outrating a lot of these other cartoons. Now, in some of these Muslim countries, pig is anathema. Pork is just crazy, right? Why would anybody eat that? That's madness, right? It's just unthinkable. Anything to do with pigs is unclean. It's haram. It's just out. You don't talk about it. It's just out. But this cartoon pig is the biggest thing there. For some reason, it gets under the radar. Strange. I can't figure it out myself. But I think it's one of those things, it's sort of like a guilty pleasure. I don't know. The big news. Anyway, while I was at the Skeptics in the Pub, and we're talking about all these things, and I was mentioning my podcast, someone had pointed out that there are missing episodes. Now, there were two reasons for this. One is because I was keeping certain podcast episodes that people were listening to over and over and over again, like the interview with Raggy Ragsdale back in episode 17, I think, and a few others. But I was deleting episodes where I had a falling out with certain people that were talking about how, this podcast is going to grow, it's fantastic. And then when it wasn't growing, I just happened to mention the term growing. It's like, well, why isn't this growing? And could you give me feedback? What is it that you want to hear? How can I make this podcast better for your listening pleasure? Well, that caused a bit of a stir. You're always talking about growth. No, you mentioned growth first. I want to know why it wasn't growing. Other people attacked me for mentioning money, even though these people who say that their focus isn't on money, and yet these are the people that promised me money, right, to do a shift for them, for their company. I worked for them for 3 days, right, training for a lead up to a shift that didn't exist, that didn't eventuate. They promised me money, and then said, oh, no, we can't pay you, we can't hire you. They didn't pay me a token gesture, which would have been 10%, and they promised me $400, right? They cried poor, but they'll spend $3,000 in front of me, right? And I had to distance myself from these people, and then I had to delete episodes where I had interviewed those people. Fairly simple, right? Plus, Spreaker only allows me a certain amount of space. That means that I can only upload 10 episodes, and then I've got to delete one. So I've kept the episodes where people are still listening to them, but I've had to delete the ones that I didn't think were very important, or they had a certain amount of views, right? But anything under say 200 listens, I'm going to delete it. It's fairly simple. You've got to keep what's popular and remove what's not, unless I get funding. And then when I mention funding, because it costs money for Spreaker and these other podcast places to have storage, it costs them money, it costs them electricity, whatever. So what happens is you store information on their servers, which then gets distributed, right? Now they get charged bandwidth. Every time you listen to a podcast, that costs them money, right? So for this to continue and to actually grow, then I have to talk about funding. Now, I don't want to go down the path of annoying you guys to have Squarespace. I'm sick of those commercials. Or Blue Apron, or any. And I don't have a problem with the companies. I can't use the companies because I'm Australian. I'm not going to advertise an American company that I can't use and test the products and say, oh yeah, this tastes great. Because I won't do that. I won't put my name to any product that I don't trust. And I'm sure you wouldn't either. But, and I'm only talking about like $5 a month, but I'm not prepared to lose money for no real gain. I didn't think that the podcaster was good enough to do that. Now that I'm 52 episodes in, I can possibly consider doing that. But in order for this to continue, you don't need to fund it. You do not need to fund this podcast. I'm not asking for money. But I need feedback. This is where the code words and things come in. This is where clicking a thumbs up comes in. Because I know that you're listening and you appreciate what I'm doing. That way, this is a two-way street. This is a sacred space. It is a little niche thing that's just between you and me. It's 30 minutes of whatever you want this to be. Whether you use this to relax, unwind, whether you use this to do the dishes. It doesn't matter, right? What was the other thing that was going on? Daredevil Season 2. Oh my God, is this a fantastic show. If you haven't seen the first season, I do recommend going back and binge watching it. There are 13 episodes, and they're designed to be watched back to back. This season, they introduce Elektra, who is an assassin and a former lover of Matthew Murdoch, who is Daredevil. If you don't know who Daredevil is, quite simply, he's very similar to Spider-Man. But what it is he had an accident and he had chemicals spilled in his eyes, so he's blind. But the chemical had a certain effect on him, and it amplified his other senses, so he could smell, he can hear. He can hear other people's heartbeats, and he can hear all sorts of sounds around him, so he's pretty much, it's as if he can see, almost like an inbuilt sonar, but he can't tell colours and things like that. But he was also taught martial arts and things like that, so you'll see him fighting ninjas and other things like this. But the other character that they brought in was the Punisher. And the Punisher, the guy that plays the Punisher, is spot on. He's absolutely perfect. The Punisher is a character who is quite controversial in Marvel comics because none of the heroes, the superheroes, kill anybody. You know, they fight the bad guys, and at the end, they all get arrested and they go to jail. The Punisher doesn't think this is a good idea, and he goes around quite literally killing villains, drug dealers, all sorts of sickos, and he's got a long, complicated story behind him. Like his parents were gunned down. Not his parents, his wife and kids were gunned down. And in the original story, he was a Vietnam veteran, but they've had to update it for his current age, and they made him like an Iraq, Afghanistan veteran. But in the show, they actually had a Vietnam veteran, just to have him acknowledge his own past within the comic books, which I think was a fantastic touch. My only complaint with the show is that it has occasionally it'll have poor lighting. You've got a fight scene at night against ninjas wearing black and Daredevil's wearing red, and you can't make out what's going on, and that annoys me a lot. But sometimes they've come up with some really creative lighting effects, so like silhouettes in front of neon lights and things like that. That was very, very brilliant. The best actor, and I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen the first season, but the best actor is Vincent D'Onofrio. He plays a character called Wilson Fisk, and aka the Kingpin, and it's a big, fat, bald, tough guy, very muscly. Not fat, he's muscly, but he's always depicted as fat in the comics. And he's an enemy of both Daredevil and Spider-Man because he's a crime boss. He's very rich, he can get what he wants. And Vincent D'Onofrio does a fantastic job in the first season, and it's a bit of a spoiler because he's in the second season of Daredevil. Absolutely fantastic. What else have I got? I've got 3 minutes to go. If you want Netflix, if you want to see Netflix in Australia, and you are with Internode as your internet service provider, you can watch it for free. You can watch Netflix for free if you are a customer of Internode, which is fantastic. I wanted to talk about Deadpool, which is an absolutely fantastic movie. I've seen it twice already at the cinemas. If you do see it, stay to the end, where they do a post-credit scene where they take on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's a scene at the end where Matthew Broderick says, "Go home, go home." And Deadpool does the same sort of thing, pretty much word for word, line for line. But then he starts talking about the sequel and stuff like that. And that's very funny. But Deadpool is a comedy first and foremost. It's R-rated. Do not take your kids. Do not take your grandkids, because it's adults only. That's why it's R-rated. Don't worry about the blood and guts and gore. It's R-rated because of the sex scenes. Some of them are quite confronting, but everybody does a fantastic job on Deadpool. The other thing, while I'm here, my next goal, maybe not for next week, because it takes a few weeks to get, is to get a police clearance, because I can get work if I get a police clearance, but it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get one, so I've got to get on top of that really quick. There's $50 I don't have. But I was told to be funny and to make sure that the audio quality of this podcast was spot on. I can't do much about the audio quality without funding, but I try to be funny. This particular podcast was not that funny, and I've got a minute left. That means I need a code word, which is the word study. STUDY, study. That's the code word, and I hope that I do see you again next week. I have a lot more interesting stuff next week. I'll have to do a lot more research, and I will probably have to talk a lot slower, maybe faster. But I hope that you take today, and the rest of the, I hope that today and the rest of the week is easy like a Sunday morn. Oh man, I'm rusty. Rusty as someone who hasn't had a chance to study. But thank you all for listening. There's 10 seconds to go. Hopefully you finished your 2-mile walk and you've done your dishes. Catch you next week. Bye for now.